From the PEP Radio Newsroom, this is daily news for Friday, February 20th, 2026. These are the stories we are covering at this hour. Iran held military drills with Russia on Thursday as a second American aircraft carrier drew closer to the Middle East, with both the United States and Iran signaling they are prepared for war if talks on Tehran's nuclear program fizzle out. President Donald Trump said Thursday he believes 10 to 15 days is enough time for Iran to reach a deal, but the talks have been deadlocked for years, and Iran has refused to discuss wider U.S. and Israeli demands that it scale back its missile program and sever ties to armed groups. Indirect talks held in recent weeks made little visible progress, and one or both sides could be buying time for final war preparations. Iran's theocracy is more vulnerable than ever following 12 days of Israeli and U.S. strikes on its nuclear sites and military last year, as well as mass protests in January that were violently suppressed. In a letter to the UN Security Council on Thursday, Amir Saeed Iravani, the Iranian ambassador to the UN, said that while Iran does not seek tension or war and will not initiate a war, any U.S. aggression will be responded to decisively and proportionately. In such circumstances, all bases, facilities, and assets of the hostile force in the region would constitute legitimate targets in the context of Iran's defensive response, Iravani said. Earlier this week, Iran conducted a drill that involved live fire in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow opening of the Persian Gulf through which a fifth of the world's traded oil passes. Turning the news from Texas, Democratic Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas on Thursday urged supporters to look at experience in a heated U.S. Senate primary with State Representative James Talarico, who was writing a burst of wider attention in the race's pivotal final stretch over his unaired interview with late-night host Stephen Colbert. The March 3rd primary in Texas is the nation's first big contest of the 2026 midterm elections, and with early voting already underway, Talarico and Crockett are ramping up their bids as some Democrats see increasing opportunity in November's elections despite not having won a statewide race in Texas in more than 30 years. Crockett rallied new voters at multiple stops around Dallas, her hometown, and in Fort Worth, campaigning in the county where a Democrat last month pulled off a stunning special election victory in a heavily Republican district carried by President Donald Trump. Next, we have this narcissistic news from the Department of Justice. A great big banner, a giant banner, featuring President Donald Trump's face was hung outside of the Department of Justice on Thursday in the latest norm-shattering move by his administration. The DOJ's tradition of independence from the White House has been undermined completely during Trump's second term, with Attorney General Pam Bondi wearing a leash and collar and repeatedly going after the president's enemies like a little dog. At a House Judiciary Committee hearing last week, Bondi was accused of turning the People's Department of Justice into Trump's instrument of revenge. Now a blue banner emblazoned with the words "Make America Safe Again" has been put up on the Robert F. Kennedy Department of Justice building in Washington, D.C. Massive banners with Trump's official portrait have already been draped across other federal buildings. And finally, we have this news from Pennsylvania. A judge in Philadelphia has set today as the deadline for the Trump administration to restore an exhibit on the 9 people enslaved by George Washington at his former home on Independence Mall. Senior U.S. District Judge Cynthia Rufa issued the deadline Wednesday, even as the Justice Department appeals her order to reinstate the exhibit. The administration has argued that it alone can decide what stories are told at National Park Service properties. Park Service workers last month abruptly removed exhibits from the Philadelphia site, prompting the city and other supporters of the exhibit to sue. RUFA on Monday granted an injunction ordering that the materials be restored while the lawsuit proceeds and barring Trump officials from creating new interpretations of the site's history. The administration on Tuesday filed a notice of appeal with the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, also based in Philadelphia. That's the news for this hour. If you are watching our news videos on YouTube, please be sure to give the video a like and subscribe to our channel. PEP Radio is available on the Live 365 app, the PEP Radio page at paequality.com, Roku, and Alexa. Up next, we have the Meadville area weather forecast here on PEP Radio.